Hey everyone, Seth at Hub City Vintage, and this week we're going to take a close and very specific look at one of the last of the Seiko 70-meter divers. Of course, I'm talking about Daini's 7006 8030. It's certainly a great looking light diver, and it's easy to see why it's a popular reference, and like many other popular vintage Seikos, counterfeits abound. These counterfeit 8030s make the rounds pretty regularly on eBay and other larger marketplaces, and if this video informs just one potential buyer, it was certainly worth it in my book. This, of course, is the blue sunburst dial variant, and it is one of 5 colorways for this reference. In addition to the blue, there's a flat black dial, a matte silver sunburst, a glossy yellow sunburst not unlike the Pogue, and lastly, this one, a flat pumpkin orange that I think is unique to this reference. And in fact, it's the reason for this video. These two watches are actually owned by the same client. In fact, the orange one was sent several months back. It was found in his father's house, had been sitting there for something like 40 years untouched. It was actually in really great shape. The crystal was a bit scratched, but with a replacement crystal and a service, it was about as good as you can hope to find, as you can see. And he got it back, was thrilled with it, couldn't wait to share it on Instagram. And of course, immediately someone shot it down as a fake. Now, as you can imagine, knowing that this watch had sat in his father's house for decades, untouched, it seemed unlikely that it would be a fake 8030. And so he asked me about it, and if I felt pretty certain that it was a genuine watch, and it absolutely is. In every way, this is completely genuine Seiko 8030, just like this blue one here, which you can see is also just a phenomenal example. You can see that the blue one is this deep navy sunburst with a really bright glossy lacquer top. The hands have their polished finish and white striping, and the orange sweep hand, obviously that is genuine. You can just make out the top of the collet at the center of the sweep, which a lot of the aftermarket hands are just orange throughout, and most times you'll actually see that they have a bit of texturing in the paint rather than how these Seiko orange ones are almost a glossy top in the paint. But the blue one is absolutely genuine. He didn't have much concern for that, and there are lots of reference pictures for that one online if you wanted to compare it. But I have seen buyer's guides and collector's guides regarding the orange one that can lead you to believe that there really is only the yellow sunburst version and that this flat orange is not the genuine article. So I'm hoping that we'll take a closer look in this video, and I'll prove to you that this is a genuine Seiko. If you see these about, you'll know what you're looking at. I think one of the main reasons that this watch is often thought of as counterfeit is because it's really the only color dial that the counterfeiters even got close to the right color. The blue is a very bright sort of a royal blue. It really stands out as not even close to the dark navy sunburst of the real deal. And the black, of course, you really can just see the difference between Seiko's matte black and the glossy black of the fake. Of course, the silver is again a very bright silver, not like the matte silver of Seiko's. But this orange color, they really did a pretty good job of getting pretty close to that color. But there are obviously a lot of tells with those fake 7006 8030s, and we're going to take a closer look at these two, and I'll help you to understand what exactly you're looking at and some ways that we can prove that they are absolutely genuine Seiko watches. Before we get to the dials, let's take a look at some of the other components for a few easy tells concerning authenticity. It would certainly make things easier if I had an example of a counterfeit 8030 for comparison, but I don't, and I certainly wasn't going to line the pockets of some shady seller to prove a point. Let's take a look at the cases and case backs. The case design here is one of my favorites, and clearly a Daini signature here. I love the flared lugs and the chopped case sides. It really is just a great design. I've heard some say that it's reminiscent of the Certina DS2 that's from the similar era, but I certainly am partial to the Seiko. I really love this bezel. I love how tall it is and has a nice conical design. And of course, really deep knurling there. But what we really want to look at is the insert. Now, this is a very nice example of this insert. We'll bring the other one back up too, just so you can see how similar that they are. Now, one thing to notice here is the pip. We've got a lens, an acrylic lens over top of the pip. You can see, if I catch it in the light just right, that it's not just an open pip there with luminous material behind, but it's actually covered by an acrylic lens. And on most of the counterfeits that I've seen, that acrylic lens is either absent altogether or has much more of a dome shape to it. And the luminous material itself, here you can see we've got a lighter color here, almost a white, and a bit more of a khaki patina in this one. But either way, there's not a lot of color there, and most of the counterfeits have a greenish color, luminous behind the pip. Now, I have to imagine that the counterfeiters manufactured entire fake case backs because most of the ones that I've seen have very similar serial numbers, most of them starting with either 356 or 387, and I think that information is in at least one or more of the collector's guides for the 8030s that are available online. But here you can see that each of these has a unique serial number, and each 8030 that you run across should have one as well. Here we've got a 32 serial number, so that's going to put us at February of 73, and of course this one has a 33, so that puts us obviously at March of 73, and those numbers will come into play momentarily when we take a look at the dials again to help us to validate what we're looking at with the dials and that they are both genuine. As far as the movement is concerned, I've seen claims that there are entire counterfeit 7006 movements and other calibers as well. But from what I've seen, most of them either have just a counterfeit rotor or some of the other plates just don't have the same stamping. But I have seen genuine 7006 movements in these watches as well. They're pretty plentiful. There were lots of examples of lots of references for 7006, so it wouldn't be difficult to get a genuine movement. But on the calendar side, a detail that most often is left out is that here you can see the dates are shown in black and the days are on a silver disc. And on most of the counterfeits that I've seen, both are in silver, both the day and the date, rather than there being this contrasting color here. Here's a closer look at the hands, and as you can see, there are only two hand styles available for any colorway of this reference. You have the white striped here on the left, and that goes with the darker dials, the blue or the black. And for contrast, on the right hand side is the black striped version, and that goes with the silver or the yellow, the sunburst yellow, or the orange that we're talking about today. The sweeps are exactly the same. Any of these watches that you are looking at, that sweep hand should be something along the lines of that color. Granted, for UV exposure, some fading, it might be something a bit of a more washed out orange, a lighter or darker color. In fact, I can see just a slight difference in the color between these two. The left one seems to be a bit of a deeper orange color as compared to the one on the right is a bit lighter, but this is the color orange, and there is no red or any other color for the sweep on this watch. Here's a picture of a known counterfeit. You can see that these hour and minute hands are fairly chopped. The luminous material is a bright white. There's obviously no visible patina there, but there's also no taper in the shape of the luminous windows or the hands, and they're fairly short. The minute hand is nothing close to the same length as the sweep hand, but notice the center of the sweep there. You can see that there's almost a raised portion in the center where the hand sits almost below the collet rather than that drop down that you see in the genuine one, where you can see the metal has sort of a countersunk portion in the center where it meets the collet. Important distinction to notice. And I will say that most of the counterfeit sweep hands that you'll see as replacements on Seikos have that raised portion in the center above the collet. And typically the paint is not as glossy as what you might see on a genuine Seiko sweep. They have almost a textured finish, and of course the color is almost always never just quite right. And finally, the dials. I think we can agree it would take a pretty dedicated counterfeiter to get this far using a genuine Seiko case, a genuine Seiko bezel and bezel insert, genuine Seiko hands to get the movement correct, to use an authentic 7006 movement with the correct day and date wheels, only to get to this point and decide to use a counterfeit dial. I just don't think it's likely. we can take a look at these dials from an overall perspective and see just how similar they are. You can see that the block printing is uniform throughout both dials. It's the same size. The spacing where the hour markers meet is the same. Printing for the dial identifiers at the bottom, 7006 8130S, is the same and same size on both. Of course, our water, 70 M resist and 19 joules is exactly the same size. The spacing is identical. And of course, one detail that counterfeiters never quite get right, and I think once I mention it to you, if you start looking for it, you'll really pick up on it. The Dyne lightning bolt logo there below the 19 joules, almost always they never get that exactly right. As you can see here, it's got nice and fine, sharp points on either end. There's a very small section in the middle there with a fatter flare on either side. And as you look at counterfeit dials, and you'll take a look at that Dyne logo, and it's the same with the Suwa S as well. And they never get that one right either. Once you get an idea of how that genuine logo should look, then those fakes will begin to stand out to you, and they'll be glaring. Of course, at the top, and you have a Seiko badge and automatic. You can see that the outer line of the A lines up just nicely with the inner line of the S, and of course on the other side, that C sits just left of the bottom of the O on either of these dials. The markers are the same size. The striping is uniform throughout, almost always counterfeiters dials. The paint striping, if there is striping on the markers, is almost always never centered. It's off to either one side or the other. Of course, the luminous material here is the same uniform color throughout, the same color as the luminous material in the hands, and there's no bleed over. It's very finely aligned on the markers themselves, but there are even a few smaller details that we can discuss that I think any counterfeiter would have a hard time mimicking even on their best day. We'll start with the blue dial, and this will be much easier to see from the reverse side. Actually, both details that I want to show you are obviously going to be evident from the reverse side, so let's get that flipped over and take a look. On the reverse side of the blue dial, almost because of the way these dials are manufactured, at some point on the outer rim of the dial, I know it could be different depending on which dial it is. It won't always be in the same spot, but for this 7006 8030, the dial is notched at the 3 o'clock, dead 3 o'clock. You can see just on the outside of that, the back side of the day-date frame. At the border of the dial, there is a notch right there in the dial. And whether that has to do with casting or stamping from these dial blanks, it's just a remnant that's left over from manufacturing, and almost every single Seiko dial has that divot somewhere on the dial. Of course, you can see the riveting from the markers on the back side. And almost more importantly than anything else, you can see we've got our stamping on the back for production. Just look at that second set of numbers there, 3-2. This is 1973 in February. And if we compare that with our case back from this watch, we have a single month's variance. Our case back is a 3-3. So we have March of 73. This case back and this dial were produced within 1 month of each other, and that is a very acceptable variance. 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 months is not unheard of. But these are two very closely related production numbers for both of these. And of course, that divot being there at the 3, I am absolutely convinced that this is a genuine blue Seiko 8030 dial, and with the orange you'll see, we'll take a look at the same detailing. If we flip that one over onto the back side, at 3 o'clock we have our same notch right here just outside of the day date frame, and you can see the riveting from the markers as well. The dial feet look the same, and most importantly, we have our production stamp, our T and 31 there. Of course, like we said, this is in 1973. This dial would have been produced in January of that year. And if we take a look at the case back for this one, again, a single month variance, 3-2 here, February of 73. So if you had any doubts as to whether this orange dial existed for this 8030 model, hopefully we've put that to rest today. You can see that it is a genuine dial, and I'm even going to try to shade my lighting here a bit just to give you a better idea of what that color actually looks like. It's a bit of a deeper orange. I try to give you the best lighting possible so you can see those details, but sometimes it does play with the color a little bit. I'm trying to, I almost had it right about there. That's a little bit of a closer look at what that color looks like just to your naked eye in regular lighting. It brightens up a bit with the light directly on it. But it is a genuine Seiko dial. There is no question. If you have proof otherwise, or comments or questions, certainly leave those below. Hopefully that puts our clients' mind at ease about the authenticity of his watch, and any of you others that may have these orange 8030s, post them on Instagram, share them with the world. They are not fake. The color, as you can see from the counterfeit one that we showed earlier, it is very close to the same color, and I think that does throw some people, but it's a genuine dial, and there just is no question. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. You can also join us over at Patreon, where $7 a month gets you access to exclusive content, comprehensive rundowns of all of our upcoming inventory, and more. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.